bumper sticker I saw on the way to church. You've all seen it. Well, I'll use a different word, but the bumper sticker says, stuff happens. And they use a different word, but because of church, I'll say, stuff happens. Yeah. And when it happens, it feels like it's random, like there's no purpose or meaning to it. But we really have to trust the meaning and purpose of everything before us, because the universe provides whatever we need for our soul growth. And it's not always pretty or fun, but the universe provides it. Now when it happens, I'm kind of like Charlie Brown. Any Charlie Brown fans here? Did you see the cartoon where he can't sleep at night? He's tossing and turning all night. And finally he asks, where have I gone wrong? And a voice comes out of nowhere and says, this is going to take more than one night. You ever feel like me? Me too. And then when it happens, we pray to change the world. We pray to a God out there to change the world. But the Course in Miracles tells us that when we're that discouraged, do not ask to change the world. There's no point in trying to change the world. It is incapable of change because it's merely an effect of the law of cause and effect. But there is indeed a point in changing your thoughts about the world. Now here you're changing the cause, and the effect will change automatically. Or as George Carlin said it best, when he said, yeah, you get kind of nervous when I mention George Carlin. I know what you're thinking, especially when I said the word stuff before. I know what he was saying. But he said, I put $1 in the change machine and nothing happened. Put $1 in the change machine and nothing happened. Isn't that what we do? We keep trying to make something out there change. And that plane of duality that we live on is a plane of opposites. And there are many blessings in this plane, but there's also many challenges. And that's why when Jesus said, the poor you will have with you always, he wasn't being cruel or uncaring. He meant in the plane of duality, when you have rich, you have poor. When you have good, you have evil. If you have up, you have down. In this plane of duality until your consciousness changes, which lifts you up above the world of fear and separation thinking into that higher consciousness of oneness, of grace, of love, of joy. And isn't that why we come here every Sunday? To shift our consciousness into that higher realm. Because those familiar states of mind that we all get into, I hope it's not just me, they become our comfort zones, don't they? Don't you love a good comfort zone? I have them in everything. You know, some examples. I had this old pillow. It was an old feather pillow. And I won't tell you how many years I had this feather pillow. And I was like a little kid with a blankie. If we went to a hotel, I'd have to take my pillow with me because I could only sleep on this pillow. No other pillow was right for me. And then that pillow got so disgusting. I had to get rid of it. And what agony that first night when I had to use a different pillow. I was out of my comfort zone. I like Crocs for shoes. Do you know the Crocs? They're made of rubber. I had a pair of Crocs. I won't tell you how many years I had that pair of Crocs until they became so disgusting I had to get rid of them and get a new pair. They don't feel like the old pair. You see, those comfort things, like the shoes, the old comfortable shoes, are like my consciousness in my comfort zone. It's familiar. I feel safe there. I know what to expect there. And I get stuck in that limiting consciousness. And then when stuff happens, it shifts me out of my comfort zone. And I have to deal with that. It's like the Moses and the Israelites. They wandered around the desert for 40 years. And I know you're tired of the old joke that it was because Moses was a man and refused to ask for directions. I know you heard that before. But they wandered around for 40 years. But it was such a great metaphysical story because they wandered around not just because Moses wouldn't ask for directions, but they were stuck in their comfort zones, wandering around in their desert experience. And like us, I hope you're all like me, whining and complaining and angry at God. They refused to change, so they kept wandering around. And we too keep waiting for the world to change while we're wandering around instead of using prayer and meditation and spiritual study to lift us up above the world of duality. Now, the Israelites had a happy ending. Finally, 40 years later, something happened, and they were able to enter the Promised Land, which metaphysically is a different state of mind. They were able to enter the Promised Land not because they finally asked for directions, but because something in them, after 40 years, had finally changed, and they found themselves in a whole different place. That's why it took so long. Life is simply wandering around in the desert of consciousness until we change, and we too can enter that kingdom of heaven on earth that Jesus talked about. And so we have to ask Spirit for directions. Ask for direction, and then watch for the signs. Feel those inner promptings, where to go, what to do, and trust the flow of where life takes you and what is before you. The universe provides whatever experience we need to get us there, to that higher state of mind. My frog came back. I have to trust the flow of my frogs this morning. Adi Ashanti, in the book Falling into Grace, said, when we begin to surrender our demand that life change, that life alter itself to suit our ideals, then everything opens up. We begin to awaken from this dream of separateness and struggle. And we realize that the grace we were always seeking is actually right there at the center of our own existence. All being expressed out there, cause and effect, as within, so without. And the Israelites, I just love to read about them because they were so like moi, so like us. They didn't trust the signs before them. They didn't trust that they were being taken care of. And yet there was manna. Every morning there was manna on the desert, which is sort of like a dew in that particular desert that you can actually eat. Every day the food was there in front of them. And they didn't trust that they were being guided. The scripture says clouds by day and lights by night. And yeah, maybe it was a UFO ship, I don't know. But whatever it was, it doesn't matter. They were guided day by day, night by night. And they simply had to trust their journey of life, no matter what the circumstances, no matter how long it takes or what it looks like. There's a blessing in all. And everything out there shows us what we need to change in here, as within, so without, the cause and the effect. Now I have a great story today, one of my favorite stories, and I know I say that all the time, but this is my favorite story, okay? It's a true story. All good stories are true, right? And there's a DVD on Netflix called Searching for Sugarman. Anybody seen Searching for? So one person has seen Searching. Wasn't that wonderful? It's a true story about a musician. His name was Rod Rodriguez. And actually his first name was Sixto because he was the sixth son of a Mexican immigrant. And he was a fabulous musician. Really unusual, very fabulous. So he finally got signed up by a record company to make a record. And he thought, wow, this is it. Well, the record was a flop. It just never took off. And so he was such a humble man. He decided, okay, this isn't working. So he got a job in construction. And he continued to sing around town in the clubs at night, but he worked construction during the day. But he had it in his heart that he wanted to make a difference. He wanted to help the world in some way. So he ran for mayor of Detroit. But meanwhile, he was thinking, I'll run for mayor of Detroit, that's how I'll help the world. But meanwhile, something was happening that he was completely unaware of. Someone took one of his albums to South Africa. They traveled to South Africa, took it in a suitcase, and people there started listening to his album. And it caught on. People were selling it, bootleg copies. Everybody in South Africa was listening to this man. He was a catalyst for inspiration and influence in protesting apartheid. You could say he was the Pete Seeger of Africa, the man who wrote We Shall Overcome. And you see, back then, protesting was dangerous. You could go to prison for that. But somehow putting it to music is safer. And they were able to do that. And other musicians caught on to his words and his ideas, and they started singing it with him. He became more famous than Elvis or the Beatles in South Africa. And he didn't have a clue this was going on. But you see what he was doing through his music, giving people permission to free their minds through the music. What changed their minds? And he was a catalyst for a whole continent making change. And he never once knew, all the while it was happening, that he was that popular. And then, of course, like all famous people, people started to make up stories about him. What happened to this guy? Who is he? And there was a story that was going around that he died by committing suicide by setting himself on fire in a rock concert. Isn't that all good rock musicians have that story, right? Well, years later, this is going on, and there was a DJ and a record shop owner that was so fascinated by this story, and he thought, well, I want to know what happened to this man. So he started doing this documentary, The Searching for Sugarman, and he wanted to know how he died. You know, was that a true story, how he died? Well, come to find out, not only did he's still alive, he found him. Can you imagine how it would feel if we in Tennessee found out Elvis was still alive? How would that feel? Elvis has not left the building. So he invites him to go to Africa for some concerts. And Rodriguez figures, well, yeah, I'll go. He doesn't have a clue. And he's blown away when he arrives. Crowds of people greet him. 6 sold-out concerts. And when he walks on stage, the people roar and cheer. Imagine how that must have felt with this man not thinking he had made any difference in the world, and he was trying so hard to make a difference. Now, the moral of the story, and why I love it so much, is when we're wandering around the wilderness of life, we really do need to stop whining and complaining, although I always give myself 5 minutes. TK and I know we got 5 minutes to whine and complain, and then we're done. And know your union with God. Ask for directions, trust the signs, the inner promptings, and just go with the flow of where life is taking you. There is meaning and purpose in everything. Who knows, you may be someone else's sugarman. You may be the catalyst without even knowing it in someone else's life. And he was so humble. Oh, you watch the DVD, by the end of it, you feel his spirit. Even if you aren't crazy about the music, you feel his spirit. He was so humble. He didn't know his music had changed a continent. And even though dishonest producers who had sold his initial record never gave him any money for it, he wasn't bitter. He never became bitter. And what little money he made from local concerts, he gave to his children and lived a very simple life. And at the end of the documentary, again, you feel his spirit. He was transcendent. He had left this world of wilderness and made it to the promised land of consciousness, that parallel universe the promised land of grace. Home is where you're accepted. And he found his home in South Africa. So how do we achieve this? State of mind, not fame and fortune. Well, when stuff happens and it seems unfair, change your perception. See it differently. Extend loving service wherever you are, however you can. You know, Rodriguez kept running for mayor. He thought that was it. Do not ask to change the world. Trust the flow of life to change you. To change you. Let us take that into prayer. God, we are willing to change. And we release and let go of our comfort zones. We are willing to step out of our comfort zones, knowing that in union with God we are safe, we are provided for, we are protected and supported in all ways. And our life and world is unfolding in perfect divine order for our soul growth, for our expanded consciousness, to become the love that we are, more fully, joyously, effortlessly, with grace. And so it is, so it truly is. Amen.